so like my background is I grew up PCA, so Presbyterian, like kind of like an evangelical. I went to Summit Church, so J.D. Greer's church, who ended up becoming like the president of the Southern Baptist Convention before they renamed itself the Great Commission something or the other. And then I went out to Seattle, and I was a deacon at Mars Hill. So like my credentials are I would have beers with Mark Driscoll like on a like semi-monthly basis, and we would chat and those kind of things. So like that's kind of, but I remember the Young, Restless, and Reformed being a term, and I remember Mark Driscoll being part of it. I remember John Piper kind of being a part of that kind of, even though he doesn't really fit in, I don't think, with Young, Restless, Reformed or Emergent. He's far more of an institutionalist than I think that those guys are. But like
Reformed Baptists are never really institutional.
Yeah, but that's J.D. Greer, right? That is Mark Driscoll. Like that's what they are, and so it was kind of like weird to me. But like, so I kind of like fell into it. It wasn't something that I was seeking out, but I was like, I both wanted something. I felt like the mainline institutions had a problem that they weren't taking seriously about how to run their churches, and I thought that. And you spoke about this a little bit. Maybe we can get into it, Paul. Let's run this like a business, right? Let's have KPIs. Let's have success metrics. Let's have all these kind of things, and let's figure out what works, what sells, and what we can do. And that's what appealed to me about the Emergent church. But then also I was on the conservative wing of it because I wanted my theology to be taken seriously. So I was more on the Young, Restless, Reform, and that's kind of how I ended up like in the Mark Driscoll sphere of that entire thing. So that's my background.
All right.
Like I remember I was at Desiring God's postmodernism conference, and that's when Driscoll was there, when he was like all the rage, and when he talked about how he didn't need security because he just kicked people in the face. So like, I mean, I was there for all that. I mean, I have all my background. So my credentialing, I guess, is that all of my background was in John Piper, Gospel Coalition, Together for the Gospel, those circles. Like I was in those churches reading all those books, but I was also reading books like Blue Like Jazz. I was reading Rob Bell's books. I was having pastors give me really bad takes on what Rob Bell was saying, like Nick was doing in the comments earlier. Sorry, Freerillian, but so like, because what happened to me once, I remember going to a church. I had just read this section in Rob Bell's book, Velvet Elvis, the trampolines and the bricks. And the pastor from the pulpit, I just read it that week, said, Rob Bell doesn't think the virgin birth is important. And I was like, that's slander. That's not what he said. That has nothing to do with what he said. Read the book again. So I don't know. I've been a proponent of adding iron to my straw men for years.
So yeah, Luke has serious credentials in this whole Emergent thing. But this next guy, you haven't even emerged enough to embrace the Trinity. I mean, and you didn't even embrace the Trinity
Rob
in order
Bell,
to leave it.
Rob Bell taught me how to water ski.
There it is.
Bang. Well, I guess
like, I still think, Paul, I still think you underestimate how much I was in normal evangelical circles for a lot of my life. And that I've always had sort of a 1 foot in, 1 foot out posture to the whole thing. But, in college, I was reading John Piper. I went to a conference or something where I'm pretty sure he was the headline speaker. I read Brian McLaren and Rob Bell and, all those sorts of things. I'm younger than Luke. So I was like young and in college while, Luke is out there in sort of semi-adult land going to church and stuff like that. And so things hit you differently when you're younger or at that age versus whatever age Luke is. But I mean, I know all of these things. I remember friends listening to Mark Driscoll podcasts or recorded versions of his sermons or whatever you want to call it. And so I think you underestimate how much of a normal evangelical, say I was from teenage years till late 20s and stuff like that.
All right.
Can we highlight this almond tree comment? Sam loves the Bible, and that gets you into trouble. Because it's a good one.
Mostly with
There it is.
Christians, actually.
Yep, it's
There it
true.
is.
Yeah, it's really the Christians who loving the Bible will get you in trouble with.
Pretty much.
Father Eric, Father Eric, Father Eric was a little disturbed when I had Connor on because Father Eric felt I was cheating on him because, he's like Father Eric is like the one Catholic priest I've had lunch with. And now I'm going to go spend a whole bunch of time with these Dominicans on the west coast of Ireland. I'm going to be staying in the monastery. It's a sleepover. They invited a Calvinist for a sleepover. So who knows what's going to happen there.
The emanating church, Father. That's like an anti-incarnation comment.
Well, this next guy, I don't think we have any real questions because he early on identified himself as part of the Driscoll sphere. And, his high church affinities are now obviously clearly on display by his faux background.
We decided that Tripp is Driscoll and I'm Rob in this conversation.
Yeah, I could see that. But you're going to have to unmute there, Mark, Mark Tripp. And so give us just a little insight of your history with the Emergent peeps. And he's still muted. Boy, for a guy who works in tech, you're pulling a complete Van Donk there, Tripp. And still he's muted. Tripp. Okay, Tripp, you're going backstage. You're coming in last. I'm bringing Sarah first. So go work your stuff out there, Tripp. Sarah, now you I didn't know. No, not that I didn't know you because you're actually an OG. It's just that we had this conversation long time ago, and you don't come up on the streams too often. You mostly stay sort of in Luke's little exclusive, secret network communities. But because you went ortho, I thought, oh, there's a story there, I bet. So Sarah, what's your history with the Emergents?
My first introduction was probably when I first moved from Texas to North Dakota, we were leading a Bible study, an intervarsity Bible study with some college students. And someone had brought these really well-produced, pithy videos, and they were called Pneuma.
Yeah. I remember them.
Yeah, so we were playing them for the kids, and they were really, really impactful. Like everyone was very impressed with these little videos. I mean, they were very punchy, very to the point. And so we watched all of those with this Bible study group with college kids. And I think I probably wasn't as immersed in the Emergent movement, but it definitely was influential on me. So I read Blue Lake Jazz and all of those books, Velvet Elvis, I think. But it wasn't too long before the circles that I was in basically kicked Rob Bell out of the approved list of things that are acceptable to listen to. And I remember getting phone calls saying, "Do you still have those Pneuma videos? You need to throw those out. We can't listen to this guy anymore.
Burn your CDs."
Yeah. And I think at that point, I kind of shifted more to gospel coalition type stuff. But I think there was definitely something in the Emergent movement that resonated with me as far as especially the mystical and things like that carried through my whole journey, even though I kind of put all of that to the side for a while in trying to figure out my weird charismatic background and what that meant. Yeah, I guess that's it kind of in a nutshell.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. And Tripp.
Can you guys hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay. I think Tim Cook's trying to silence me. But I before I get started, I do like that Sam is making fun of Luke for being old. That's really fun.
We don't know how the oldest one is in this group, actually. So,
well, besides Paul, yeah, it's Sarah.
Well, yes,
she's ancient. Yeah, no. So, like, my background is I grew up PCA, so Presbyterian, like kind of like an evangelical. I went to Summit Church, so J.D. Greer's church, who ended up becoming like the president of the Southern Baptist Convention before they renamed itself the Great Commission something or the other. And then I went out to Seattle, and I was a deacon at Mars Hill. So like my credentials are I would have beers with Mark Driscoll like on a like semi-monthly basis, and we would chat and those kind of things. So like that's kind of, but I remember the Young, Restless, and Reformed being a term, and I remember Mark Driscoll being part of it. I remember John Piper kind of being a part of that kind of, even though he doesn't really fit in, I don't think, with Young, Restless, Reformed or Emergent. He's far more of an institutionalist than I think that those guys are. But like
Reformed Baptists are never really institutional.
Yeah, but that's J.D. Greer, right? That is Mark Driscoll. Like that's what they are, and so it was kind of like weird to me. But like, so I kind of like fell into it. It wasn't something that I was seeking out, but I was like, I both wanted something. I felt like the mainline institutions had a problem that they weren't taking seriously about how to run their churches, and I thought that. And you spoke about this a little bit. Maybe we can get into it, Paul. Is let's run this like a business, right? Let's have KPIs. Let's have success metrics. Let's have all these kind of things, and let's figure out what works, what sells, and what we can do. And that's what appealed to me about the Emergent church. But then also I was on the conservative wing of it because I wanted my theology to be taken seriously. So I was more on the Young, Restless, Reformed, and that's kind of how I ended up like in the Mark Driscoll sphere of that entire thing. So that's my background.
All right. Now I have someone coming in, hopefully, that Luke doesn't know, because he's not a part of the secret sacred sphere that Luke is running. And I am waiting for him. I texted him this morning someone mentioned in the very early live chat that, oh, this guy needs to be here. And I thought, yes. So I texted him this morning, and he just texted me now and said, I want in. I said, okay. So we're waiting for him to pop in, but we will see if and when he makes it. I won't name him until you all see him in the backstage, but hopefully he makes it at least in for the pitch and the point and not just the play. So for those of you who don't understand how Estuary works, Estuary can be boiled down into introduction, pitch, an idea to the group, can be something intellectual, can be something contextual, can be something personal, can be something estuarial, but pitch something to the group, at least a place to begin the conversation. And then the third round is point, where you point to an idea that someone else has put on the table. Now, this really struggles. Some people really struggle with this, like Luke does, because the massive awesomeness of his personality just doesn't let the pitch reach escape velocity. So it's the only thing he sees is the thing that he just pitched. But we will see if he can manage this today. So you pitch, and then you point, and then we play. And that's basically how Estuary works. And you don't have to have an emergent pitch today, but given the fact that this is sort of hot in our conversations now, and it might win, but you might have a non-emergent thing to pitch and it will win, but we will probably talk about this. And I'm still waiting. I think our special guest has to arrange himself in his special chair in his special room. That might be some indications of who this might be. So yes, we will see. So Luke, because you are you just go
I'm so curious. Oh, I knew it.
I started making these emergent videos.
Okay.
And he just
Close your YouTube, rookie.
How to fix my audio.
he just because we might miss out on all those sweet F-bombs.
This is the only way I can see CCW anymore, Paul, is virtually.
Well, he did leave the corner for 5 years. And I guess he's having a sabbatical from his no, we've lost him. I just mentioned that and he goes away. He'll probably be back. So there's who our special guest is. So Luke, let's start the pitching. Luke, okay. What would you pitch to the group?
So I think I can get this to a point. I think that my main interest in this is realizing how central the emergent movement was in my thinking and in my development. But then sorry about the navel gazing, but I want to relate it to the spirit of the TLC. And then I want to relate it to kind of like the Driscoll. There was a point in one of your recent videos where you had a conversation, you brought up this, it was maybe a clip of someone in the emergent movement who was having a conversation with Driscoll, and they started talking about, and Driscoll basically drew a line in the sand about complementarianism. And this guy was just like, oh, okay, I guess this isn't going to work. And so because of doctrinal and ideological differences, the emergent movement just kind of splintered. And I just want to riff on that and how that is related to what at least has not happened yet in the TLC. The TLC is kind of almost anti that in a way. So,
okay. All right. Sam, what would you like to pitch?
Can we just talk already?
No. Sorry.
Sam doesn't like the protocol.
I don't like the protocol.
Chicago people have been resisting the framework the whole time, but you're in my house now. We're going to do the protocol.
My pitch is whatever Luke just said.
Ooh.
Sam brings a week.
What a rebel. What a contrarian.
What a contrarian. Sarah, do you have anything to pitch?
I mean, I actually like what Luke said. We were talking in our super private chat group just about like the four of us and how we all have a very unique journey and perspective, and all are kind of in different places and still disagree on a lot of things. And yet there's something that is keeping us together in conversation. So that's interesting to me. I guess it's just the individualness of how we ended up where we are and how come we're still wanting to talk to each other.
Good. Thank you. Trip, do you have anything you'd like to pitch?
I'd like to pitch that I think that it's kind of similar to like something that Jordan Peterson talks about a lot, where like conservatives and liberals need each other. That like liberals are the one that push the boundaries and they're entrepreneurs, they explore, do those kind of things, and conservatives are one that keep the boundaries. And so I think that what happened with the emergent church was things had gotten too rigid and stodgy, and there was a recognition that that needed to happen. And so what happened with the emergent church largely was they're like, okay, we can throw off all these denominational boundaries and all these confessional boundaries and all those kind of things. And what I think ended up happening was they threw off so much that it wasn't cohesive. Like it could not stand the test of time. And so the institution, they couldn't build an institution around it. So like Acts 29, those kind of things that I was a part of, like they could not stand the test of time because they threw off too much of it. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's like where should be the bounded versus the guarded and those kind of things is where the emergent church failed. It was a reactionary force to a very like bounded view of the church. And I think that's where it both had its appeals to people that like, hey, we don't have to come with all this baggage, but then also what's actually keeping us together. And I think that's what's happening. That's what happened with the emergent church.
All right, good. I think Sam's gonna feel bad about not having pitched, because there's some good pitches here, Sam. There's some good pitches. Now,
just wait till we start talking.
Yeah, he's going to throw in a pitch. He's going to sneak it in there after.
Well, there'll be plenty of pitches thrown, I'm sure. So, but CW, we didn't get you in for the introduction round. Now, I started, with this. I started with these videos about the Emergent, and you were on it, like a.
No, normally I try to avoid your
videos. I mean, it was just there. And why did this whole Emergent thing grab your interest? What's your background?
Man, so during my heady days in Bible college, the Emergent church was kind of just becoming a thing in the zeitgeist of this admittedly very hyper-specific Christian subculture that I was in. So I guess it's deeply intuitive to me as a part of my really kind of formative experience. And that was of course, 20 years ago now, kind of outing myself as a tragic middle-aged person. But yeah, during that time, the situatedness of my own life, I guess, meant that it was part of my experience. And of course, as I told you, I live a mile away from Solomon's Porch, or the late Solomon's Porch. I knew so many people who had kind of gone through that experiment in Christian community. So I feel like I had a kind of inside. Yeah, I rubbed shoulders with Doug Padgett. I mean, I don't think he wouldn't know who I am or anything, but I like many of the people he described, the buses showing up or whatever, except I happened to be somebody in the neighborhood. But yeah, I even attended his, he had this thing where he would do a Bible study in advance of the Sunday. It's not really a service, but the Sunday thing, to kind of create his sermon. And I went to a couple of those where, so I don't know. So I feel like I have some experience with it anyway. But
all right.
Telling from Bible college that I wanted to do some kind of non-institutional church experiment, and she just looked at me and then was like, "The Emergent Church is already doing that." And ever since then, I've resented them so deeply. You have no idea.
All right. Do you now that's your introduction, do you have anything you'd like to pitch to the group? A proposal you'd like to put on the table? A saucy idea that will make all of us say, "Oh."
Well, I noticed that you don't seem to pitch. I don't know if that was true in this case, because I was.
Well, it depends, because Sam didn't pitch. I might feel the need, but
I think you should. But along the lines of what Tripp was saying, I'm kind of full disclosure. I'm kind of in this radical Kierkegaardian place in my life now. And I don't know if that's because of passing through the Emergent Church or trying to integrate in both an Orthodox Presbyterian church and a mainline Presbyterian church. So something there has messed up my brain or something. But I tend to think of all institutional churches within Christianity as maybe more properly understood as parachurch organizations. So in a way, I've kind of deeply imbibed the ethos of something of Emergent church, even though they were kind of the basement dwellers of Big Eva or something, perhaps. But yeah, I think that the institution is something the church does and not something it is. And so along the lines of what Tripp was getting at, I think the larger question, I wonder, for unironically Christian people in this cultural moment is, what is the underlying unity that serves as a kind of identifiable continuity in all this diverse Christian stuff, whether it be the formal, speculative, in my view, theological product, or the socio-cultural phenomenon of how we practice our faith. What is the continuity? What's the underlying unity? Or maybe a skeptic might ask, is there a there? That's what I'm interested in.
I'm just gonna pause and say that's how to pitch. That's how to pitch. Nicely done, CW. Nicely done. I'm just gonna give a little pitch because one of the things that I noticed was the Seeker Church basically said we can have evangelical unity by not touching this thing we call the gospel. The Young, Restless, and Reformed take something of that, and the thing about the Young, Restless, and Reformed is what the Young, Restless, and Reformed sort of did was make the gospel this magic pill that just bang. We got to get, you can hear that from Piper. You can hear that from Keller. We got to get them with the gospel. And of course, the gospel for them is heavy substitutionary atonement. I'm not going to use the P word because I think that's a modern accretion, which is not appropriate to it, but I'm sure some of you will say it. But, substitutionary atonement, the gospel, and then their entire shtick sort of went around the gospel, while the evangelicals were like, you would go to Willow Creek and, we're gonna meet in what looks like a junior college. We're gonna have a completely blank stage. There's not going to be any symbolism around to scare the boomers who have, are still having the DTs from the mainline church. And we're going to have some smooth jazz, and we're going to have a little skit, and then we're going to have a little story and something to tug the heartstring. And then Bill Hybels is going to hit them with the 4 spiritual laws or the Roman road or evangelism explosion. So the left side of the Emergent church was like, hey, wait a minute. Shouldn't we talk about this gospel? And that's when you sort of had this supernova of theological speculation that got them kicked out of the institution. And again, one of the key things, if you listen back on the history, most of these people were youth pastors who were used to being employed. And when they got fired, they didn't know what to do. And I think that's a little different from the TLC where, I know Luke's raking in those fat bucks on all of his live streams. But beyond that, this is pretty much financially speaking, a fairly skeleton operation. So the other pitch I would have is the question, where does Peugeot fit into this picture? Because I think actually Peugeot and Peterson and Vervaeke, but especially Peugeot, is foundational from say post-emergent into the Orthodox moment. So those are my pitches. Now we have the point. Luke, from all the things placed on the table here, what would you like to point to?
Should have been taking notes. Sam's, I think. Just kidding. Just kidding. I will go with Trips will piss me off. So
I'm here for.
That's what Trip and I, that's often what happens is we just go back and forth.
That surprises me like 0% between the 4 of you.
And Sam and Sarah just is homers into the bushes.
No, I alternate between siding with Trip or siding with Luke, depending on who I'm liking better that day.
Yeah, true.
He's like Northern Israel siding with the Assyrians and the Babylonians. It's all Sam does.
Darn Unitarians.
Always seeking unity.
I do like CW's pitch. I don't know that it is related. It's a really big topic. I'll maybe just go with Peugeot.
Okay. Peugeot. All right. There you go. Sam, would you like to point, or are you still sitting out of the Estuary?
No, I'll point at Cale Zeldin. I thought that he had the best point. There's something of a failed generational handoff that's going on. So
yep,
I'll
100%.
follow the Estuary protocol by pointing to
such a rebel. It's unbelievable.
No, but we'll get to me, but
you'll get your turn, Trip. You'll get your turn. I mean, because we're doing things decent and in order here. That's a little Christian Reform DNA. So Sam, instead of pointing, pitches Cale Zeldin a failed generational handoff. All right, so he gets his pitch and his point from the comment section. Sarah, what would you like to point to?
I was going to go with Peugeot, but Luke stole it.
No, you can point to the same thing because I'm counting here, and that's where we'll start.
Can I go with Peugeot plus the attraction to liturgy?
Yes, you can.
Like the fact that I think all of us here have an increased interest and focus on liturgy.
Yeah, liturgy would have made a really good pitch because liturgy is behind this, especially in conjunction with Cale's idea. So, all right, Trip, your turn. What do you want to point to?
See, I think that the things that we've talked about, like in the previous 3 pitches, are all somewhat related.
Mm-hmm.
I think that like the failed generational handoff, I think liturgy, and I think Peugeot, they're all actually related because we're all trying to marry tradition to like novelty. And I think that these are all really, really related. And Peugeot is kind of like a personality who's trying to do that. He's trying to both be liturgically sound. He's like trying to talk about like what the church has historically thought about, how people used to think about it, but then also be new. And so I think that this is all like, these are all intertwined. And I think that's probably what we should be talking about. So like, I don't know what you want me to put to, it's like all of these, like, I think they're all
that's okay. I'll sort that out. But good. All right. CW, what would you like to point to?
Yeah, well, I mean, the observation Trip just made, or even kind of reiterating the theme of his original pitch, makes me think of David Coises, which I'm probably butchering his name, unfortunately, but he's teaching at Redeemer. I'm sure Paul's seen
CRC guy.
Yeah, seen some of his stuff around, but he wrote a book on political ideologies in which he made this point that I'd never heard anybody make, but I thought was absolutely genius, which was that liberal and conservative are simply dispositions. They're not necessarily indicative of any static position. And of course, that was in the context of politics, but I found that very illuminating that, it's this relativizing pressure that causes us to collapse these otherwise essential dispositions of each person and or corporate movement, into these totalizing ideological perspectives or agendas. So that might have some, or go some ways to reconciling the novelty and the traditional. But in far as pointing, I think the most, the non-Peugeot part of what Paul was saying is the part that's most palatable to me, because I mean, I remember part of my own kind of emergence out of evangelicalism was realizing that a lot of that theology is undifferentiated in such a way that something like atonement theory is not theory, but conflated with Christianity per se. And that kind of revelation was a big part of my not really feeling comfortable in that universe anymore. So to the extent to which that's what you were driving at, I resonate a lot with.
Yeah, that's good. Well, just tallying up things, sort of the Peugeot point wins, but I will point to what CW said, because there are some parallels here in terms of sort of the civilizational Christianity. And I think the Emergent movement was deeply about industrial Christianity. And so when CW said all churches are parachurch organizations, and I think especially in the Protestant world, and just the video I made this morning, which of course got a little spicy for some people, when I basically said, and that was as I was watching Nathan Jacobs, because I love Nathan Jacobs, and as he was working on the hiddenness of God stuff. But what exactly, where exactly are institutions? People for a long time have made the point that, did Jesus start an institution? Now that's a really Luke's going like this and it's going like this, right on top of each other.
I think body is what the Bible says. I think that's what it says.
So so much of the emergent movement was, and I like what Sam eventually pointed to, which was Kale's idea. Kale was another guy that I thought, maybe I should get Kale in on this one. So, but Kale's not always available. And then CW came up in the comments. Thought, no, I'll get CW in on this. So, yeah, but Peugeot wins the straw poll. But of course,
just have to do my best to represent the Catholic position, Paul. So.
All right.
Against my nature, but
go ahead and play. Go ahead and play.